Hello YouTubers and 3D printing enthusiasts, whoever else might be watching. So, AI and FreeCAD. Now just right up front I want to make clear I'm not using AI to generate models for FreeCAD. I don't like that idea. It's already starting and the model sites are getting flooded with crap. Benign, simple, similar crap. No. But I did find a very valid use for AI with FreeCAD, and it has to do with macros. Now, macros are, of course, the ability to create a routine that automates some repetitive or tedious process in software. And in FreeCAD, the macro support system is one of the most powerful in that it uses Python, an actual programming language, and has access to just about all the data within the program. And the functions within the program. So it's possible to write a program that does something with FreeCAD. The problem is you have to write a program. Python, I've done some programming here on the channel. I'm a dabbler. I have to relearn the syntax of the language with each project as I come back to it. Learning Python, even for me with some experience, to write macros in FreeCAD would be an endeavor that would take days, weeks, maybe a month. So that's where AI comes in. AI can write programs, and the interface to it is simple, direct language. You can say, I want a program to do this, describing it in English, and it'll spit out the code. And the same is true with macros for FreeCAD. Now, I've been having a lot of fun lately. My artistic output is creating these little vases. You can see this one. This is my latest. Look how that catches the light. Isn't that cool? And part of making these vases is one step is very, very repetitive and tedious. And so I want to automate that with a macro, and I'm going to use Google Gemini to write the code. Now you could use Grok or ChatGPT or Claude or Llama or any AI tool you want. Most all of them can write code. But I'm going to use Google Gemini. So let's go to FreeCAD. I'll show you the process I want to automate, and then we will see if we can prompt Gemini to write us a macro to automate that process. Okay, I'm here in FreeCAD, and I've started to create a simple bowl using the same technique that I would normally have had to use. So what I did was I created a base sketch. This is the pattern for the side of the vase. And what I would have to do now is I would have to create multiple copies, which I've done. I copied the sketch. I created several different copies of it. I've started to manipulate them manually, just to give you an illustration here. I haven't affected this last one yet. What I had to do for each of these copies is I had to come in here to their placement data, position and set Z to move them up. And then I had to go into each sketch, like I'm going to do with the last one here, and scale it. So I select the sketch geometry, I select the scale tool, and then I scale it out. And it's tedious, especially if I had a very large vase. I might have to have 20 of these sketches that I have to manipulate. And then, of course, once I've got them manipulated, I can easily do an additive loft to create the shape. But doing it manually like this is, like I said, very tedious. I should mention too, another part of it is, if I want a certain shape to the vase, I have to manually scale these to try to follow a visual outline of what I want the vase to look like. If I want it to come out and then come in for a neck, I would have to manually scale these sketches, look at them in this view, go back in and adjust them. It can take half an hour just setting up the sketches before I do the additive loft. It's a lot of work. And that's what I'm hoping to automate. So we're going to use Google Gemini, and I've developed or written a prompt for it that I'm going to show you now. It's quite long, but that's okay. You want to be verbose, and I want to be very descriptive to the AI, specifically what I want it to do. I'm trying to create a complex vase shape in FreeCAD, and I need a way to automate the process. And then I give it more detail. The final shape will be created using an additive loft from the part design. This requires many sketches that are progressively scaled. You have to describe what you're wanting to do as if you're talking to a very smart child. And then I ask it a question, can you create a FreeCAD macro to automate the process? And then I give it detail about how I want to do it. Now, I was copying this sketch and then pasting in copies of it and then manipulating them. But for the AI to manipulate them, it's difficult to describe in detail how to have it manipulate sketch data itself. In other words, how to have it modify the scale of the sketch geometry. That gets really, really complex. There is a tool, though, if we go over to the draft workbench and we use the draft clone tool. Let me turn off the grid. I'll select this base sketch and I'll make a clone of it. And now if we have this clone and we look down at its data, we see that not only do we have placement data that we can use to position it and rotate it, but also the draft clone has a scale. We can adjust the scale just by adjusting this data type. It's going to be far easier to instruct the AI to simply manipulate this data in the clone than to try to manipulate the geometry inside the sketch. So I want to use these draft clones for the rest of the segments for the additive loft. So that's what I'm going to direct it to do. You have to think about that too. You have to think about what's the easiest data to manipulate for what you're trying to accomplish and point the AI in that direction. The other thing I want to do is I want to create a profile sketch for the shape of the vase. So I'm going to go back to part design, and I'm going to create a sketch, but I'm going to create it on the XZ plane or the YZ plane, whichever one you want to use. I'm going to use the XZ plane. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a B-spline that's going to start about where the edge of my base sketch is, and it's going to come up and it's going to define the shape of the vase something like that. Let's say that's the shape that I want for my vase. And what I want the AI to do then is I want it to scale the sketches so that their edge lines up with the B-spline. That way I can simply just draw a profile, and hopefully the macro will just automatically create however many sketches it needs to create for the height of the vase. And the height of the B-spline, let's see what the height is. Right now it's 180 millimeters. So I'll close, and I'm going to name that sketch Profile Sketch. Much easier than trying to visually do it by scaling the sketches manually. So that's my plan, and I'm pretty sure the AI will have no trouble using this B-spline as a guide for scaling the sketches. So we'll have a body, a base sketch, and a profile sketch, and I want it to create as many clones as it needs to. I'm going to want to be able to tell it how far to rotate or twist the clones if I want to put a twist on the vase. And I'm going to want to give it a minimum rotation value for each sketch, because there's another issue with the additive loft, especially when you have a repeating pattern like this. Every 30 degrees I have a repeating pattern. If I rotate the next sketch more than about halfway, the additive loft is going to look for similar shapes and it'll snap back. It won't continue the twist, which is something I've learned. I think I mentioned it in the previous video I did on creating the little bowl. If you rotate too far, instead of twisting the loft, it'll snap back to the previous iteration of the pattern. So I need to have a minimum rotation value. You have to think about all of these things. You know, all of the issues that you run into when you're doing it manually, you have to include in your prompt. So let's go back to the prompt. And here I have an idea of how it should work. The macro should use two main sketches as input, a base sketch and a profile sketch, and I describe what they are for. The B-spline will define the vase's profile. The Z-axis will represent the vase's height, and the X-axis will represent the radius or scale of the cross-section at each height. So I'm telling the AI what to do with that B-spline. And then I tell it what the macro should do. The macro should work as follows. It should prompt the user for two values. A total twist angle, which will default to 90 degrees, and that's the total amount of twist that I would apply over the entire vase, right? Maximum rotation per clone, we talked about that. You can't rotate them too far or the pattern will snap back. Default it to 9 degrees and then let me enter a value. The macro should then clone the base sketch multiple times using the draft workbench clone tool, placing the clones at increasing heights along the Z-axis. And you have to just be really specific. For each clone, its height and rotation and scale should be determined automatically. The height of each clone will be equally spaced along the total height of the profile sketch. The rotation will be a fraction of the total twist angle distributed evenly. That's important. We want to make sure it evenly rotates each of those to reach the total. And the scale should be determined by the X value of the B-spline at the clone's corresponding Z height. Now here I tell it, manipulate the clone data to accomplish the height and with attachment Z offset rotation angle and the draft clone scale factor. So again, being very specific. All generated sketches should be placed inside. I should change that to all generated clones. I don't want to confuse it. Should be placed inside the selected part design body. And the original base sketch and generated clones should all be placed in the body, ready for the user to select them and apply the additive loft. And then I tell it, it should also include some error checking. So again, a very, very specific prompt. So let's take that, I'm going to copy it, and we're going to go to Gemini, and we're going to feed it that prompt. So now we have the entire prompt in there, and let's see what it does with it. Okay, now that it's done thinking and it has given us the macro, it's giving us some information over here about how to use it. And if we look at the macro itself, it comments things very well. This is what's nice about code that the AI generates. So it gives us right here at the top a description of what it's supposed to do, and then it comments things as we go down. Function to get user input, main macro function, and so on. So here's all our code. I am going to copy it, and we'll go back to FreeCAD. So in FreeCAD, I'm going to come up here to the macro menu, and I'm going to select macros, and we are going to create a macro. We'll enter its name. We'll call it AutoVase. And now we simply paste our code in. So now that I've pasted the macro in, I'm ready to run it. So over here on the model, I select the body, the base sketch, and the profile sketch, holding down Control so I can select them all. We come over here to the macro, and we go to the macro menu, and we execute macro. And we got an error. So this might happen. It might not get it right the first time, but that's okay. We can copy this error, and we can go back to the AI, and we can tell it the macro produced this error. It's going to think about it, and it should make some corrections and give us a new copy of the script. Okay. There we are. I reviewed the error you're seeing. Thank you for providing the message. Indicates the macro is trying to access a property on the wrong type of data, yada, yada, yada. So it explains what problems it ran into, and then it makes changes and gives us a new copy of the macro. So we will now copy this one. And we'll go back to FreeCAD. And I need to erase what's in here, so I'm going to do a Control A to select all and hit the backspace. And then a Control V to paste the new version of the macro in. And now we'll try to run it again. I've still got everything selected. So we'll come up here to macro and we'll execute macro. And we got a different error. So you might have to do this a few times until it gets the code right. Back to Gemini. A new error message. And I'll paste the error in. And it'll do its thing again. Okay, it took about 7 iterations. I think we are good now. We've stopped getting error messages, so let's see how this works. Let's go back to our sample file. Oh, you know what? There's one other thing, little detail. If you're going to do a loft of a vase, at the bottom you want just a short little section without any scaling to give it a straight start. Otherwise it'll get all loopy at the bottom. I need to fix that. Should have thought of that. So what I'm going to do is take a copy of that base sketch. I'll do a Control C to copy it, Control V to paste it back in, and let's drag this up in the body. I need this positioned downward about 2 millimeters. So I'm going to come down here, placement, position, Z, -2. There we go. Should have thought of that. You always want to have, when you're doing an additive loft, you want to have the first section be straight without any scaling. Otherwise it'll just get really big loops there as it tries to calculate a smooth transition. Okay, let's do this. Let's take our base sketch where I want the loft to begin. Well, the body, base sketch, profile sketch. And we will run the macro. Okay, let me think. I want 90 degrees of rotation, but I don't want to twist each profile too far. Let's try 5 degrees per clone, 90 degrees total rotation. Let's see what we get. Hey, it created the sections. Look at that. 18 of them. Let's go look at the model. Look at that. It has created and scaled our sections roughly following our spline. So we get that shape. And we're all ready to do our loft. So I need to select these in order, which means I actually need to select that copy first because it's at the bottom. So I'll select that, and then that one, which is above it, and then we'll just select the rest of these in order. FreeCAD keeps track of what order you click on these in when you're doing a loft, and that's the order it'll do the loft in. So we've got to make sure that we select them in the proper order. And then we should be able to do an additive loft. Look at that. Okay, look at that. Isn't that cool? It would have taken at least a half an hour to manually scale and rotate those sketches and get them all in exactly the type of position and place I want. And you can see down here how we have this nice straight start to the loft because of that extra section. Yeah, that's another tip for you when you're doing with additive lofts. But there we go. There is our vase. So using our AI to create this very complex macro with just some user input. These are all the error handling sections down here. Look at that. It tests for things and gives us an error if it runs into a problem. I'm going to save this macro and use the heck out of it. What else might you use this for? Well, anything tedious that you need to automate, you can use AI and just describe to it what you want, and it'll write it for you. So there you go. If you want to write a macro to automate something in FreeCAD, and you're not a programmer and you don't want to spend weeks learning Python, AI might be the middleman for you to help you with writing your macros for you. I think that that's a very good application of AI within CAD. You still control the design, you still create the model. It can just be your assistant that does the boring, repetitive work for you. I hope you found that useful, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you're not already a subscriber, click to subscribe. Join us on the Facebook channel for discussion about the videos. And if you'd like to help support this channel, please click to support me on my Patreon page.